Hey hand letterers, it's Kristen, and this is our letter with me session for the month of October. So to start, like I usually do, we're going to open the files that you've downloaded, and those are in the Files app on your iPad, probably under your Downloads section. I have mine in a saved folder in my iCloud drive. So you're going to tap the lettering practice brush set, and that is automatically going to import into Procreate and open Procreate for you. So let's go back. We're going to tap the color palette. That's going to do the same thing, automatically import and open Procreate. And then we're going to open whichever one of these sheets you prefer. I'm going to be using the Procreate one because that's going to open right in Procreate for me. If you want to do this by hand and use markers, pens, pencils, whatever, you can open the PDF and print those out. You can also import those to Procreate if you want, but we're going to be using the Procreate, so I'm going to tap on that, and there is the canvas which opened for us in Procreate. So if I tap the gallery to back out of there, it's going to show up as my first canvas there. So let's tap back into that. And if you've taken these with me before, these sessions, we have 5 styles. We have basic monoline, flourished monoline, brushy bounce, flourished classic, and then a quirky style. And then there are layers, blank layers above here that I made for you to practice your lettering in. These layers are locked so you don't accidentally write on them. So if I were to try to write on them, I'm going to get a pop-up that says that layer is locked and you can't write on it. Now, if you want to see a different style, you're just going to turn off the one on top, which is going to show us flourished monoline. Turn that one off to show brushy bounce, and so on. Okay, so let's go to our color palette menu, and the palettes, when you import them, go to the bottom of your palettes. So it's this one right here, and I am going to just tap on the orange, and you'll see it'll have that little blue check mark. That means that is now set as your default palette. And now let's go into the brush menu, and your brushes go all the way to the top of your list. So right here, the lettering practice AF brush. Oops, that is not supposed to be in there. I'm just going to delete that. Looks like I might have accidentally hit the plus sign on there. Okay, so for our basic lettering style, we're going to use the basic mono AF brush, and I'm on orange, but you can use any color. You can use black or whatever you like. And I'm just going to test out the size. Again, I forgot to go on the right layer, so that did that to me. So I want to make sure I'm on the practice here layer, and let's try that again. So that is too small, so I'm going to turn the size up. Let's try 10. It's a little bit too big, so let's go with 8. And I zoom in, and I'm just going to follow what is there in gray, and I just made an oval and lifted my pen. You could keep your pen down and continue with that loop through the O, but I like to pick my pen up in between each shape just because it gives me more control over my hand and the line. So this one I'm going to try to do all in one stroke. And I'm ending my stroke inside of the gray, inside of the gray template. That way when I make the new stroke, it's going to cover that up. Otherwise, I'll show you, say like on this one, if I stop before and then I pick up, you might get a little bit of a break. You can't really see it there, but it might just not connect really nicely. Okay, so there we have October. Let's go and do candy. And in each of these sessions, I try to add in some sort of fun Procreate tip to help you not just learn lettering, but learn Procreate interface and its features and how you can use that in your lettering. And at the end of this, after we're finished going through and you can see how I letter each of these, I'm going to show you 5 different ways you can make shadows in your lettering. So you can stay tuned and hang out with me until the end, or if you just want to see that part, you can fast forward, whatever you like. Okay, so that was Hayride. So the S I do in all one stroke and then lift my pen up, then an underturn and another underturn, then a compound curve. So like here, if I would have stopped before and then did the F, you see how that doesn't kind of line up right correctly there? So that's another tip, is to try to stop, pick your pen up once it's inside that gray area, and then you won't have such a noticeable, if at any, break in that line. Just have to check my nib really quick because I can see little scratches in my screen as I'm drawing. And I do have a screen protector on, so it looks like it's scratching at my screen protector. And I just changed my nib on my Apple Pencil, so not too long ago, so it shouldn't be acting up already. Okay, and there is sunflower. So those are our 5 words in the basic. So now we can turn off, before we turn this layer off, I want to take out one of the words. So I will take out October, or yeah, let's take out October. Just take out the first one. No, let's do gourds. Sorry, I'm being indecisive. Okay, so to take that out, because they're all on one layer in here, I want to pull out just the gourds from this one layer. So I'm going to go to the selection tool, and down at the bottom, choose freehand. Make sure color fill is off. And I'm going to zoom in and just draw around the word that I want to pull out from there. Okay. And then I'm going to do 3-finger swipe down on the screen, and that's going to pull up the copy and paste menu. And I want to do cut and paste. Okay, so it doesn't look like anything happened, but if you go to the layers, it took gourds out of that list. So now when I turn off the list, all that remains is gourds, and we're going to come back to that later. I'm actually going to go to the arrow and move it over to the middle, and then like up a little bit to the top of the paper. And I'm going to turn that off for now. We're going to save that for later. And let's turn off the basic monoline. So we are now showing our flourished monoline, and we want to be on a new practice here layer. And you can change your color if you want. Let's go with this dark, it looks almost black, but it's like a very dark purple. And we're going to change our brush to the mono flourish. And I'm going to zoom in and make sure this is a good size. It could actually be a little bit bigger. 10 is good. Okay, so for this one, we're going to start here and do all of this in one stroke. So remember to move your hand and not just your fingers. And it's okay, like I always say, it's okay if you don't line up perfectly. We're not going for perfection. We're just practicing how to draw the letters. And I didn't like that T was a little crooked, so I did a 2-finger tap to undo it. We're just going for the shapes of the letters, how to make them. Now normally I would go and cross the T, but because the T is going to be part of the B, I'm going to hold off on that and just go right to the O. So this, I just do an oval and a loop through to the B. Okay, now with the B, you could start here and draw your B all in one, but I am going to start here because I like to draw my flourishes after I write my letters, because I usually, here comes my dog, I don't know if you can hear her walking in here. I usually look at the word and decide where I want my flourishes after I letter it. So like right here, I could see this could have been a flourish, so then I'll just figure that through. Hi, Macy. Macy says hi. Okay, now Candy. So same thing, I would normally start here. You can, just for practice, start here, but when I started, you know, flourishing on my own, I started with the letter and then go in and add the flourish, because it's just, like I said, easier for me to see the word as a whole and sort of the empty areas of what needs flourishing. But you absolutely can go in and start with the flourish if you like, and if that's more comfortable for you. And this style is slanted, unlike the first one we did. So I try to keep my letters all parallel to that angle. So let's say, let me do this one first, and then I'll show you like in the R, or even on the D. So you can see that this O, like the sides of the O, are parallel to these slant lines, but if I make the O straight up and down and the D straight up and down, not angled to that, if I zoom out, you can see that that D now looks really out of place with the other letters. So that's why it's really important to maintain the angle, to keep the angle consistent throughout all of your letters in your word. Here, I just kind of close it up with a little dot there, because that's going to give it a more, just a more consistent look. Okay, so hayride. This you could probably do all in one stroke here, this part of the H. And then this one, I went back in afterwards and added that flourish. Underturn, underturn, and then this descending stem loop I turned into a flourish that way. And then the exit stroke of the R is a flourish. And then let's start here. Normally I would start here, but just to show you, it's just as easy to start there when you're practicing the flourish for the ascending stem loop. and then a little flourish on the exit stroke of the E. And now let's do sunflower. So I do the S all in one stroke. Again, moving your hand and not your fingers is going to give you more of a looser, nicer flourish. So with this F, you can do this all in one stroke, or you can break it up into a couple different strokes. Oops, I accidentally undid that one. Okay, so there we have our 5 words in the flourished monoline. And let's save October for this one. So again, let's go to our selection menu. We're still on freehand, and I'm just going to draw around October, 3 fingers down, and then do cut and paste. And that put October in a new layer for us. So I'm going to turn off the other words, and let me turn on the gourds again. So now I'm still on October. I'm going to tap the arrow to move October beneath the gourds. I like that. So I'm just setting these up to do shadows with you later. Okay, now let's go to a new blank layer, and we're going to turn off flourished monoline, and that is going to show us the brushy bounce style. So for this, let's go to, I don't know, let's go to this green color here. And in our brushes, we're going to go to the brushy bounce. And I'm going to zoom in. That's a good size. So it's on a size 8. And this is a style that most beginner hand letterers struggle with, because you have to now, before we didn't have to apply any pressure, but now with this pressure sensitive brush, you are going to need an Apple pencil for this, or a stylus which has pressure sensitivity built into it. And on your downstrokes, when you're moving your pencil towards you, you're going to press hard, and as you start to move away from you, you're going to lift that pressure up, and then moving towards you, press down, and then as it moves away, lift up again. So light pressure up, start to press down hard, coming towards you, and then as you move away from you, lift up on the pressure for a thinner line. So basically, thin lines up and thick lines down. And that's how you get this brush look, as if you were using a paintbrush or a brush pen or something to give you that contrast in the sizes of the lines that we're making. So light pressure up, hard pressure down, light pressure up. Because we're coming back down a little bit, I just do a little bit of pressure and then ease up on that for the top of the R, and then hard pressure down, light pressure up. Again, I'm ending inside of the next letter. Light pressure, hard pressure, light pressure, and then lift up. So we made an O, and now we're going to make the ascending stem loop. Light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. So you might think that making a D might all be in one stroke, and it's not. And that's the difference between hand lettering and handwriting. So handwriting, you would do, handwriting is fast and you do it all usually. You write a letter all in one stroke, but with hand lettering, it's slow and it's in pieces and it's intentional. And it's more along the lines of drawing shapes than it is drawing letters. Okay, a hayride. Now this H I do in all one stroke, but you can, I'll show you in a second. So this is all one stroke. But if that's too hard to do all at once, you can definitely break it up into two, so, or more. You can do one stroke there, one stroke here, and then do that last stroke. Same thing with A's. A lot of people do it all in one stroke, but for more control and better hand lettering skills, breaking it up is better. Okay, and finally sunflower. All right, there's our 5 words for that. And this time let's take out candy. So selection menu, draw around the word we want, 3 finger swipe down, and do cut and paste. And let's turn that layer off. And let's turn October and gourds back on so we can line up candy underneath it, like that. And turn those off. And let's go to a new blank layer. Let's turn off our brushy bounce, which is showing our flourished classic underneath. And for this one, I'm going to go back to the orange. I don't want to use yellow because it's kind of too light for this thin style. So this style is also it's also the same as the brushy bounce because it has thin and thick lines and that you use pressure with. My words are having a difficult time getting out of my mouth today. And so you have your thick line down, your thin lines up, and then we have our added flourishes in the thin lines. Okay, so I'm going to tilt my canvas a little bit because it's just easier for me to do this tilted. And for the O, you can start at the top here. Some people like to start on the right side. It doesn't really matter if you want to start on the right or left. And you're going to do hard pressure down, light pressure up. And you can continue with that flourish if you want, but it is a doozy. So if you would have done all of that in one stroke, that's what that would look like. So if you want it simpler, let's just do the O and then pick up our pencil. And then I'll save that flourish for when we get to the crossbar of the T. So for the C, it starts with a little dot and then light pressure up, hard pressure down, and light pressure back up. The T is hard pressure all the way down, following the angle of that line. And then the O, hard pressure down, light pressure up. And then the underturn for the O is sort of the exit stroke. And then the B, again, I start here, hard pressure coming down, light pressure coming up, and then there's the exit stroke for the B. So now here, I could start my flourish here and stop right there at the T, and then the O, I could finish that flourish there. Okay, so when you're looking at it afterwards, it doesn't look like I picked up my pen anywhere. It just looks like all one flourish. Okay, then the E, the R. Again, this one is a big flourish, so I zoom out to make sure I can see the whole thing. And you can do this all in one, or you can pick up your pen in between if it's too much. So if it were to be too much, you can pick up your pen wherever the lines meet up. So there, there would be another one, and there. Okay, so let's start here with the flourish. It's all light pressure, and then heavy pressure down, and light pressure up. And with flourishing, and I've said this before in previous Letter With Me sessions, that the rules kind of break for flourishing, because even though like you're coming down here and then back up, that is okay, you can do that, but for my style that I'm going with, this sort of elegant style, I keep it all the flourishes, thin lines, and light pressure. So I'll show you here. So normally I would come down with hard pressure and back up with light pressure. So that kind of puts more emphasis on the flourishes and not the word. And I don't want, like, I want the flourishes to be there, but I don't want them to overpower the word. And that's why I like to keep my flourishes thin. Okay, and then gourds. I love the G, so we're going light pressure up, hard pressure down, light pressure all the way for the flourish. Whoops, that was not a good transition there. I kind of stayed thick going up, so I'm going to undo that and try again, go a little bit slower. Sorry if you can hear that car alarm in the background. It's not mine. So the S is, you could do hard pressure all the way down. but I like to do hard pressure and then light pressure and then hard pressure and then back up to light pressure. Just kind of gives a little bit of more interest there, and then end out with a flourish. And of course, you could probably hear in the background my pet rats are deciding to wake up and get a drink. Okay, so for the H, I start here at the top and I do this line coming down, light pressure up, line coming down, hard pressure down, and light pressure up. And then I go back in and add this flourish there. So I'm just going to do this all in one stroke, but like I showed you before, feel free to pick up your pen and make it into several steps if that's easier for you. And don't feel like you need to follow my examples. So, for instance, here I have the E exit stroke coming out, going to like a curved under flourish. You can absolutely come up with your own flourishes if you like. So, I mean, you could do something completely different with that if you like. And have fun and experiment with it, and that's just going to be how you learn, is by learning the rules and then being able to break them in ways that still looks, try to do hard pressure down, being able to break them to kind of define your style of lettering. Going to zoom out to get that whole F. Okay, and there we have our 5 flourished words. And this time let's pick out, let's go with hayride. We haven't done that one yet. So selection, draw around it, 3 finger swipe down, cut and paste, go to the layers and turn off the other words, turn on the first 3, and let's move this beneath candy. Okay, and let's turn those off. And now let's turn off flourished classic, which is going to leave us with this quirky style. And for this one, let's try to see if this yellow will work for sunflower. And for our brush, we're going to choose quirky. Make sure I'm on a blank layer. And that's a good color. I just want to make sure you can see it on the screen. All right, so this looks like it might be pressure sensitive, but it's not. so you don't have to press hard to get the thin and thick lines. The way I have this pen made is that the thick lines come with vertical strokes and the thin lines come with horizontal strokes. So like you can see here in the ER, so a horizontal stroke is thin while a vertical stroke is thicker. So it kind of gives the appearance of brush lettering, but without the pressure needed for that. And I really like writing in this style because it's just fun and quirky, like I named it. So, and it's also fun when you're doing a composition, when you're doing like a quote or something, because oftentimes when you're writing a longer quote or saying, you might run into the issues of when you're doing script of some letters are taller or longer than other letters. So, you know, for this one, you might have chords. So you have your G, your O, your U. So the G goes beneath and your D goes above. Okay, so like you might have a hard time with the word above it going into the D or the word below it going into the G. But when you have this style, the lowercase and uppercase, like all the letters are the same height. And that's why I think it is more versatile to use this style when doing some types of composition and I don't want to fiddle too much with the extenders and descenders and ascenders and all of that. And with this alphabet, what I did, and you can find this in the first one I did of the Letter With Me sessions, which was each of these styles, every letter of the alphabet in each of these styles. So for this style, I have at least two styles for every letter. So for example, there's this W, but then there's also, you could do this W, just a little bit of a different style. Same thing with the E. You can have the small E or the uppercase E. So you can, write your word out, and then if you don't like how that looks, you can definitely change it to the different one. So for like this R, you can do that R, or you can do this R, or you can do this R. Okay. So just so you know, if you're not happy with any of these, you can definitely look to that alphabet reference sheet. Okay, so now let's take the sunflower out of this one. We're going to go to selection menu, draw a round sunflower, three finger swipe down and cut and paste, and then go to layers. Let's turn on these other ones, and I'm going to move sunflower to the bottom. Okay, and now let's turn off those lettered ones that we did, and also let's turn off the practice sheets. So now we just have our background color layer, which is white, but let's go and tap that just for some fun here, and let's choose that cream color from the color palette and hit done. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to kind of organize all of these. So I'm going to tap on the chords. I'm also going to select the October word. So to select more than one, you swipe it to the right, just a quick little swipe. So I'm gonna do that to Candy, Hayride, and Sunflower. And then what I'm gonna do is tap Group, and it's gonna put them all together underneath each other in this layer group. So now I can drag this group to the top, and now I have those 5 words I can play with. And if I want to say move them all at the same time, I just have to go to the group and go to the arrow, and I can move them down to the center. And I can also make them larger, which I'm going to do just for your ability to be able to see it better. Okay, so with shadows, let me go to black in the color palette. And in our layers, we're going to start with gourds, which is right here on the bottom. So let me zoom in. And what I'm going to do is select this layer. There's several ways you can do this. I'll show you a couple different ways. So one way is to select the layer. So tap it and choose select. And then go back into your layers and add a new layer. Tap the layer and choose fill layer, and that's going to fill the blank layer with the gourds word we selected with the color we have chosen, which is black. Okay, so now you can see it looks like it's black, but the orange one is still under there. It's just hidden beneath the black. So we're going to tap on the black and slide that down beneath the orange. And whoops, that's not in the layer there. Let me undo that. It doesn't need to be. I'm not going to stress about that. Okay, so now you can't really see the black. So what you can do is if you go to your transform tool, which is the arrow icon, and it's going to show you this bounding box. And to nudge something, you're going to tap it outside of this box in the direction that you want to move it. So I want my shadows, like I want my light to look like it's coming from the top left of my screen. So it's going to cast a shadow on the bottom right of the letters. So that's where I'm going to tap, is the bottom right of that square. So let's just tap 1, 2, 3 times is good. And now we have this just a thin sort of fine line that is peeking out. And that is an easy way to just kind of accent your letters a little bit. And it looks like it's got sort of a hard shadow. So it looks like the word is just maybe a little bit above the paper beneath it. And I just call that like a fine line shadow. Okay. So now let's go to our October, and now I'm going to show you a different way to make this one black. I mean, it kind of already looks black, but it's actually that purplish color. So we're going to make a duplicate of this, and you can do that by sliding it to the left and tap duplicate and go to the bottom one. And now we want to color this black. So again, we could go to just select, and you can down here tap color fill, and that fills that layer black. And this is really hard to see, so I'm going to actually really quickly make this a different color, more of a purple, so it's just a little bit easier to see from the black. Okay, so we have our purple layer and our black layer beneath it. And for this one, we're going to do the same thing for our shadow. You want to make sure you're on that layer. We're going to go to our arrow, and you can tap to nudge it or just slide to move it out from underneath the purple just a little bit. And this is really kind of hard on the eyes. It doesn't look like a shadow too much. So we want to make this a little bit fainter or more faint. So let's go to first we want to blur this a little bit. So for that, let's go to the wand, Gaussian blur, and slide your pencil from left to right on your screen to blur that. I'm only going to go about maybe 3%, and that's still a little bit too dark. So to lighten this, I turn down the opacity. So in the layers, if you tap on this little N, it's going to drop down, and you have this opacity slider here that you can turn that opacity down as low as you want. So I'm just going to stay at 25% for that. And now it looks like the October is hovering above, and it's casting a drop shadow onto the paper. So this one is just, I just call this style a drop shadow. And if you move the drop shadow, it looks like your light source is moving. So depending on where you put it, you can have it closer. It's going to make the word look like it's closer to the paper. Or if you have it further away, it's going to make the word look like it's more further away from the paper beneath it. Okay, so let's go to candy. And for this one, again, we're going to slide it to the left, tap duplicate, and select the one on the bottom. And now here's another way that you can recolor this to black. Let me just make sure I'm on black first. You can tap it and choose alpha lock, and that's going to lock those pixels in. So when I draw on that layer, I can't do anything off the layer. It's only going to go on the actual layer. And you can't really see it because that one was on. So you can see when I'm drawing, it's only doing it on the word itself. Okay. So for this one, because it's alpha locked, we can tap it and select fill layer, and you can see that filled it with black. And now we want to blur this a little bit, but you can't blur it because it's in alpha lock, so it's not going to go beyond those letters, and we want it to go beyond and blur. So we're going to tap it and choose alpha lock to turn it off. Okay, so now let's go to our wand, Gaussian blur, and we're going to blur this a little bit. Let's say 4% looks good. And now you can see it started to blur from behind. So we're going to go to the arrow and tap the arrow, and we're going to move that down and do the same thing that we did before. We're going to tap the N and turn the opacity down. I'll stop at 25. But now I'm going to add an extra level in there, in between these two. So I'm going to duplicate the top one again. And on this one, I want to turn it white. So let's go to alpha lock. Now last time we just tapped it and chose alpha lock, but if you want just a quick gesture without all that tapping, if you take 2 fingers and swipe it to the right, it alpha locks it. Then we can go to white, tap it and choose fill layer, and that fills that with white. And now we can move that out from behind, or tap if you just want to nudge it a little bit from behind there. And now that kind of gives the appearance that it is kind of stacked on top of, or like maybe even cut out. So it's sort of similar to the drop shadow, but it's adding that extra layer beneath it to make it look, again, like it's kind of stacked when it's shadow. And you can add as many of those as you like. So if you wanted to add another one, just duplicate that, change the color to, let's go with this yellow. Whoops. Let's go to this one, fill layer. And you can tap to bring that one out a little bit. Might want to move the shadow a little bit more. Okay, and that one is sort of called, like I just call that one the stacked shadows. And that's a fun style. Okay, so for Hayride, we're going to do a sort of like a floating shadow, like hayride is up in the air and there's a shadow beneath it on the ground. So as always, let's start with going to that layer and sliding it to the left to duplicate it. Let's go to the one on the bottom and let's turn this black. A different way this time to show you to turn it black is you can go to the magic wand, hue, saturation, brightness, and turn the brightness all the way down to black. And now that's turned black. And now I'm going to go to the arrow and move this down beneath it. And right now it's on uniform, but I'm going to change it to freeform, because when it's on uniform, it won't let me make it flatter. It's going to keep the dimensions of it and just make it smaller. So with freeform, now it lets me flatten it. So I'm going to flatten hayride a good bit. And let's go to Gaussian blur. Blur that. And now it looks like that's sort of casting this shadow. You can even flatten it even more. You can play with all of these nodes as much as you want, depending on how you want your shadow to look like it's cast. Whoops, it's the wrong one. And the closer the shadow is to the word, the more it's going, the hayride or the word above it is going to look closer to the floor. So if I have it down here, it's going to look like hayride is much higher, if that makes sense. Okay, and then finally for sunflower, actually let me move this word up a little bit to give myself more room to work here. Okay, so again, we are going to duplicate the layer and let's change the color to black again. So let's just go to black. We're going to alpha lock it, tap it, fill layer, and then unalpha lock it right away because we're going to blur it a little bit. Okay, so now let's go to the arrow and move that out from underneath and just kind of line it up so the top of these letters are touching the bottom of those letters. And while we have it selected, we're going to go down to the bottom and tap flip vertical. So it looks like a reflection of those letters. And also while we're still on freeform, we're going to move that to distort, because this is going to let us distort this box a little bit. So in the bottom right corner, you can tap that node and drag it out to the right. And the same with the bottom left. Tap it and drag it out to the left. And it's looking like sunflower is casting a reflective shadow onto the surface. So if you don't want it that harsh, you can again go to Gaussian blur and just soften that up a little bit to look more like a shadow. And you can also go to the end and lighten that opacity like we've done before. Like so. And then you sort of have a reflective shadow there. You could, let's move that up a little bit so it's touching a little bit more. And that looks good. So there we have 5 shadows. We have the fine line shadow, which is just a straight, or not a straight, but like a non-blurry, hard, fine line just peeking out from behind it. And this could be any color. Oftentimes if I have a dark background, I will make this white instead of black. And then we have our drop shadow, our stacked shadow, our sort of floating shadow there, and then our reflective shadow. So there you have it, 5 ways, 5 different words in 5 different styles with 5 different shadows. So I hope you enjoyed this session of Letter with me, and I will be back next month with some November words and some new Procreate tips. Thanks for watching, and happy hand lettering.